I'm in a tiny room at Headcon Aerodrome, probably the size of your average shed. And here in this room is Max Couch's workplace and Max Couch's favorite toy. It is a virtual reality flight simulator, but it's not what you might download off the internet and install onto your computer in about 15 minutes. It's a lot more complicated than that. You've got 3 monitors, you've got an instrument panel, a yoke, rudder pedals, all the switches you'd expect to find in any real airplane. You've got a throttle quadrant, but most important of all, you've got a virtual reality headset. So Max, how does this thing work?
It is uncannily real. I can see what the pilots can see from several perspectives, from the right seat, the left seat, from the flight engineer station or the navigator station. I can see my controls, which are now moving, and I've got the same perspective that the pilot of this aircraft would have had way back in the 1960s. I'm on the runway at Heathrow as well, on runway 27. Opening the throttles. You'll hear those lovely 4 Rolls-Royce. It's called the Conway Howl. V1 rotates.
Max looks like something out of a popular science documentary, as he twists and turns around in his bright blue virtual reality helmet.
And gear up.
It feels like you might be in a lab. There are wires and lasers and speakers. In fact, all that's missing is somebody with a clipboard, perhaps looking at a brain activity monitor. This is all of course very interesting, but let's face it, there are countless teenagers in countless bedrooms playing with countless virtual reality headsets. Max Couch is certainly not a teenager. But for him, this is so much more than just a game. He is a man on a mission to recreate his family history.
My father was a VC-10 captain in the 1960s, and I as a child can remember visiting the flight deck with him in command in the days, I might add, where people dressed up to go flying. With this simulator, I can relive that time, and I can also see what my father saw with his eyes. Although he's been dead for nearly 30 years, I'm back in his workplace, and I'm looking at what he looked at as a commercial pilot. I guess the goal is to try and fly all the aircraft that he did in his very long career. He flew for 40 years, from an RAF cadet to his retirement. And that for me, and I bear in mind I'm at the age now my father was when he'd retired, is a wonderful trip back in time and into his mind, if you like, into his lifestyle. And it's helped me understand a lot of things about him and about the kind of work that he was doing. I have recreated his flights to Nairobi, to Entebbe, to John F. Kennedy, to Boston, in real time, which is a little tedious at times. Bear in mind that long-distance air travel is quite tedious for most of the time. Dad used to say the most terrifying bit, 90% nothing to do, 10% terror. I think he probably meant the landing.
How do you remain sane through this very long simulated flight?
I think the challenge is to fly the aeroplane as if one actually were, maintaining all the correct speeds, settings. I mean, some people might think I'm crazy. Why would you want to do it? But for me, I'm reliving something that otherwise would be impossible to do.
Do you sometimes think about what your father would have made of this?
Well, I do. He would be nearly 100 now if he was still alive. But if I were to say, look, I'm going to take you back into the cockpit, into your workplace, from what was probably the highlight of your career, Zenith. The VC-10 was an airplane that very few got to fly, and it was a real achievement and an honour and a privilege. And if I said, right, come on, let's take you right back, I think I wonder what he would have thought, what his take on it would have been, whether he would have been bemused or genuinely excited and wanting to open the throttles and hear those Rolls-Royce engines again and feel the thrill of rotating and climbing into the air with the wheels going up. I often wonder that, or whether he would just chuckle and think, no, it's just a toy.
Personally, I don't think Captain Chris Couch would just chuckle and dismiss his son's virtual reality station as purely a toy. VR is of course old news, but using it to recreate history, both family history and aviation history, is an honorable ambition. Max Couch's VC-10, his dad's VC-10, is now on final for 27 right at Heathrow.
I have 2 whites, 2 reds. You can hear the power back to idle, into the touchdown zone, hold the landing attitude, reverse thrust selected, slat selected, gentle braking.
After Max shut down the engines, I naturally had to have a go myself. Now, I'm not rated for jets, so he set me up for the C-42. I'm sitting in a C-42 on the runway at headcon. The doors are open. The simulation is so real that you almost want to stretch out and shut them closed. So let's see what it feels like. It does make you feel a little bit dizzy. I'm looking at the panel at the moment. It feels like you can stretch out and touch it. In fact, I just did. And this is where that particular recording ends. I was just reaching out to change the altimeter setting, and honestly, I did completely forget that there really wasn't an instrument panel in front of me. Instead, all there was just a little desk with my recorder perched on top of it. That noise you heard? That was the recorder taken off on a brief local flight en route from the desk to the floor. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. I pulled off a decent landing. Well, this is it for today. Thanks for listening to this inaugural episode of the 2000 Feet podcast. We'll meet again very soon and we'll talk about flying overseas. Our guest will be the man who invented the word microlight. But until then, please subscribe, leave feedback wherever you're listening, and tell me what you'd like me to cover in future episodes. My name is Artyom Les, and you are cleared for takeoff.